thanks for that Prime Gaming sub. We see you.
Welcome back to SMITE Masters here, powered by Prime Gaming. And a big shout out to Prime Gaming for being the title sponsor of the SPL this year. You've already seen what new games you can get with Prime this month, but make sure that you're getting the most out of your membership with all the other exclusive content that Prime Gaming can offer you. And if you're not a Primer yet, just think of all of the extra stuff you can get by becoming a Primer. You can get free Twitch subs, free games, and game content on top of free Amazon delivery and more. That's a whole lot of fingers you got up there, Mifflin. That's a whole lot of counting.
Yeah, 4.
4 whole things.
I thought maybe you were going to list more.
Well, there is an and more.
Yeah, so I was prepped for the and more, but I was just counting along with what you had literally given us, which is 4 awesome benefits.
4 absolutely incredible benefits that you should sign up to Amazon Prime for right now. But Mifflin, getting back on topic, this game here, the Tartarus Titans versus the Camelot Kings, is the game that we've got coming up.
Yeah, I'm really excited, man. Getting these SPL teams back into the running, seeing how they're going to be able to compete on 9-5, how that's affected their meta, I think going to be very exciting. But let's take a look back at this bracket, man. Were you expecting this? I didn't think the Leviathans were going to win that quickly.
Well, yeah, no, it was definitely a blitz of a game, and you know what? They drafted pretty perfectly for that, and they're going to move on to the first best of 3 that we'll be seeing after this game. Of course, the winner of this game here, this next best of 1, will go up to face the Atlantis Leviathans there. And the loser will, of course, drop down to face the Oni Warriors. So let's dig into one side of this bracket. First, Mifflin, let's talk about the Tartarus Titans.
Yeah, I think the Titans are really going to benefit from the 9-5 change. I mean, maybe not so much as the Camelot Kings, because the Kings already were playing that slower pace. But when you're talking about 9-5, you got to talk about the Hunter meta, where the Wind Demons, the Kin size, and I think Cyclone Spin certainly a great place to start that conversation, because Cyclone Spin, for as long as he has been a pro, which is as long as pro has been a thing in SMITE,
True.
He has been dominant in his role, be it in the Soul Lane or now in the Hunter role. He's become a consistent pillar of the Tartarus Titans, one that this team is very willing to play through. At times, a more aggressive player, and at other times, a little bit more subdued, depending on what his team needs. And I think in 9-5, you're needing a hyper carry from your Hunter, and I really do believe Cyclone Spin will fit that style, especially considering the pacing of Hunter. It's a lot of farming in lane nowadays. It's a lot of, okay, I'm going to wait till 3rd, 4th item slot, then I can start to rotate, especially with this lack of emphasis towards the Gold Fury that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. It allows these Hunters to just sit there and farm and farm and farm until that team fight erupts around the 20-minute mark, and I think that is a style that Cyclone is not only good at, but one that he really likes to play in.
For sure, he absolutely thrives in these environments. As you mentioned, he's been dominant as is, and now that the meta favors that being dominant to the lane that he's currently in, I could basically see no outcome where Cyclone does not benefit from this kind of meta. But let's talk about his opposition here. Netrioid on the flip side here for the Camelot Kings. Definitely no slouch to this role either.
No, he is the soloing as Hunter player, Netrioid that is, but I am concerned about Netrioid's ability to continue working with that title. In 9-5, it is so much more difficult to establish those early solo kills, but still certainly a player that has got the mechanical prowess to make use of the changes in 9-5. The added TTK means that your Hunters have got a little bit more opportunity to land those auto attacks in the team fight, channel some of these crits, and Netrioid certainly a player that is capable of doing so. I mean, we even had some tweets from the Leviathan saying, hey, we're all competing for 2nd place because the Camelot Kings have got Netrioid, and it is a Hunter meta, so it seems like the pros have got his back, and for good reason. Netrioid is only impressed since he's joined the league and continues to do so since. Has a diverse god pool, can play the things like Heimdall, these very safe selections, can go towards these scalers as well, the Roms, the Jingweis of the world, and it makes it very difficult for these teams to, A, figure out how they want to address Netrioid, because if you do camp him, my man will play the Heimdall, and he will teleport to his own tier 2 tower and have a CC immune dash and knock up immunity in the Gallarhorn and make it very, very difficult for junglers or laners to work their way towards him. Or he can go towards these more aggressive selections as well. And I think that is very quickly the reason Netroid has become such a treat to watch in the league, is that diverse playstyle as well as the willingness to go for these solo kills. Again, the soloingest player, hunter player in the league, but I'd love to hear from him specifically on whether or not he thinks 9-5 is going to allow him to play that style, because having played a good deal of 9-5 now myself, we had a weekend between Masters Week 1 and now Week 2, it's so hard to kill people in the early game. And like, that's casuals. I can't imagine how difficult it's going to be for these pros lined up against other pros.
For sure. I was queued into a ranked game the other day. I got queued into solo, not my native role, and even I found it difficult to die, which is, I mean, I'm not good at solo.
And you die a lot.
I do die a lot. It's very true. I think we've played maybe 2 games together, and I think that's
you had
maybe
like 80
been
deaths, yeah.
Yeah, 80 whole deaths. It's true. I can confirm.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Did you have more?
No, that was it. That was my whole point.
All right. So there you have it. Very difficult to find kills in 9-5, or difficult to die if you're poor at the game like Blazybard.
Yeah.
And that's it. But I think, don't we have a treat waiting for everybody?
I think we do have a treat. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one of the Camelot Kings players in the studio right now. Netroid, how are you doing today, man?
Doing fine, thanks.
Fantastic. How are you feeling about today's matchup going into the Tartarus Titan so far?
I'm feeling pretty confident. I think we can like win the match pretty easy. We've been practicing stuff. We've been doing well, I would say. So yeah.
Fantastic. And like, so we were talking a little bit already on the desk here about that matchup going in between you and Cyclone. Cyclone obviously has shown himself to be a very strong player overall. Not the first time you faced him, of course, but are you thinking this different meta is going to change the dynamic of the lane at all?
Oh yes, for sure. Now it's pretty hard to kill people in lane, and it's pretty hard to go for solo kills as well. That's debatable when you get your crits, because it's all our RNG, you know. You can get 2 lucky crits, 3 lucky crits in a row, and that's it. You pretty much solo the other one, and vice versa. But apart from that, I'm kind of liking this meta, you know, counter meta, so...
Oh, fantastic. So there you go. That answers Mifflin's question about how comfortable you're going to be in this meta as someone who likes playing that aggressive playstyle. Fantastic. So, okay, so we'll broaden the scope of the question a little bit. Have you guys been doing anything specific to prepare against the Tartarus Titans themselves?
How do I say it without leaking stuff? I would say just play our game. Last time we faced them, we had a couple problems. And they play really well when it comes to like everything, I would say. They have insane players as well, so that helped them a lot. So we just have to play our game. We have to be confident about us and know that we're going to win this match.
Okay, well, fantastic. Thank you very much for coming in, Netroid. Well, I'll let you go get situated and ready for your game.
Yeah, thank you
very much. So there you go, Mifflin. Pure confidence so far. It seems like Netroid isn't phased by the change in the meta this time around. In fact, feeling like he likes it.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe not just Netroid himself, but maybe a byproduct of how the Camelot Kings like to play Smite as a squad. It's a much slower style compared to the rest of the SPL. They'll fight you over Greater Scorpions. They look for Obelisk control. They love going for these mid camps. They love looking towards these oracles. And that slower paced game, with how much longer it takes to clear minion waves, with how many camps are on the map, really will fit the Camelot Kings macro playstyle. Because what we've seen from early game aggression so far is either you are dominating entirely, and it doesn't matter that it's a little bit more difficult to take out these neutral objectives, or you get a couple of kills in the early, you're not able to quite transition into a lead. I'm talking like 5 kills in 10 minutes, you're still only like 1,500 gold up. That means that teams that are just very good at farming will have already mitigated some of that 1,500 gold in their own right, but will also be able to extend these games a little bit longer. So teams like the Leviathans, like the Camelot Kings, who have historically looked for that late game team fight, I think are going to benefit pretty mightily from 9-5. Luckily for the Tartarus Titans and their fans, the Titans have been one of the more adaptable teams. At times, they're willing to allow layers to go towards things like the Shiva or the Gilgamesh or the Erlong Shen and just dominate the early portion of the game. And at other times, the Tartarus Titans say, hey, here's the thing about how Cyclone spins, one of the best players to have ever done it, and he's on our team. Let's just get him to a point where he can do it. And generally, the Tartarus Titans will build a composition around him and take the game a little bit longer, and they're capable of playing that style of play as well. So I am excited to see how both of these squads come to play. If the Camelot Kings take it late, That's no surprise to anyone. That's not a 9-5 change. That's how the Kings like to play. I think it's going to be very indicative of how the pros view the current patch based on how the Tartarus Titans decide to address this best of one. Whether or not they go for this early game aggression, just looking for invades and controlling objectives early on, or whether or not they want to meet up with the Camelot Kings in these late game team fights, I think will speak volumes to how at least the Titans view the league and how
Sure.
they view 9-5, but maybe even a more grandiose view from the entirety of the SPL.
Potentially. Although that being said, Mifflin, you just touched on Leviathan's propensity to go for that late game. This last game, we saw them really drill in that early, quick flash pan playstyle with the Bakasura, I think, really being the driving force of that. So I think even with the long-standing inclinations of these two teams, Camelot Kings in particular, as you mentioned, like to go for that late game, I think this new patch could prompt some changes in that. Do you think we're going to see Bakasura as maybe a priority ban after that first game? That's got to be my question here.
Yeah, Bakasura has looked generally pretty strong, has got great early game presence, great 1v1 potential, will farm the map a little bit more efficiently than the majority of junglers available or meta right now, especially with this Golden Blade start, synergizes very well with the movement speed passive that Bakasura has got for himself, which will create scenarios where you can still go for ganks without sacrificing too much time in your own jungle. Whether or not he's going to be a top pick priority, I am curious to see. I know that Captain Twig has played it in the past. Layers certainly has played Bakasura as well, but when I think of Layers, I don't think of these auto-attack assassins, except for things like the Gilgamesh and the Erlang Shen, if you want to quantify them the same way. They auto-attack, but I would
say
still call them...
Erlang is, Gilgamesh isn't.
Yeah, they're both early game pressure gods, is how I'd argue, and Bakasura maybe not at that same level. Layers likes getting involved at 2, and Bakasura generally has to wait towards 5. But with Twig going towards things like the Arachne of late, I think that Bakasura probably just a blanket upgrade from there. So if one of these two teams is going to prioritize it, I'd expect it to be the Kings.
So, talking just off what you just said there about Layers really liking to get involved in these fights at level 2, we've already talked about the increased TTK, the time to kill. Do you think that's going to affect Layers in much, if any way?
So in competitive, there is a clear delineation in value between technical knockouts, TKOs, just send someone back to base, or a literal knockout, you eliminate an enemy god. I think that at level 2, the likelihood of an actual elimination, getting that first blood bounty, is largely lower. That's not a controversial statement. Everybody's just tankier at the early portions of the game. But in competitive play, I'm not comparing this to casuals, and I'm not comparing it to ranked. TKOs have just got so much value, just slowing down some of that farm, pushing a wave into the tower, or potentially looking to invade some of these back camps will have a ripple effect on the rest of the game. You can start looking at objectives if you get an early lead, or if you take over to level 5, just 3 minions before your opposition, all of a sudden, that's a power play opportunity. So whether or not Layers sees that value and perceives it as valuable enough to go for his early game aggression style of pick still is curious. But to answer the direct question, is it hampered? Yes, Layers is very unlikely to find kills at level 2 like he once did. At Worlds, just walking into lane, getting a kill by rote every single time. Not exactly an option anymore in 9-5, but forcing someone back to base on first wave, still incredibly valuable.
We'll have to see if he's able to pick that up. I got to agree with you. You got to really pay a lot of attention to that neutral farm on the map at the moment. Those Harpies really are going to be giving a lot of experience, especially now that you've got the 3 camp. You're going to be given a little bit more golden experience towards that mid lane, that kind of split across those 2 sides. But let's look back across to the Camelot Kings. We've already talked about their propensity for the late game. Do we think they are going to lean into any particular kinds of draft?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, for sure. Basically, my question was, do you think that the Camelot Kings are going to want to go into this late game draft like we saw from the Oni Warriors last game? Or do you think they're going to swap it up like the Leviathans did and potentially go for something a little bit earlier game?
I just think that the Kings, just propensity to go late in previous patches, I should lean my analysis towards late game presence again. Just Look, Netroid is going to play something that probably has an auto attack stim of some sort. I'm sure the Camelot Kings would love to get something like a Jingwei or a Rom for themselves. That lends itself towards the late game. When I think of Captain Twig, some of his signature picks, well, immediately Hunbots jumps to mind. Whether or not Hunbots is valuable, I think Facilitator Assassin's probably a little bit weaker in 9.5, as their burst is generally lacking, and Hunbots was already generally considered a pick that is just about that ultimate, just about that teamfight disruption. So if Twig wants to go towards something like that, I think that, again, will lean their composition a bit more towards the late. And the Camelot Kings have never really stricken me as a team that is really in the game of, hey, I'm going to win in the first 10 minutes. I want to win off pressure. That's not to say that they're incapable of it, and that's not to say that it doesn't come up or often or anything like that. The Camelot Kings have won games, and they've done so very quickly in the past, but I think that's generally more play on field rather than composition or strategy. They just happen to get a couple of kills early through superior rotations or superior pathing, and then they say, okay, well, we've got a lead. We might as well push it while we have it. And having late game scaling compositions means an early lead means more for you as the clock goes on.
That's fair enough. Now, unfortunately, ladies and gents, we do have a little bit of a delay, so we're going to have to throw you guys back over to a break. But when we get back, we'll be jumping into picks and bans for game number 1. So stay tuned.
Speaking little white lies. I've got a rebel soul. 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 Just get down with it, down with it, down with it. Just get down. I ain't no thing that you can chain with a ring, and I ain't no place for admiring eyes. I've got a rebel soul. I've got a rebel soul. I've got a rebel soul. I've got a rebel soul.
Welcome back, ladies and gents. I'm very sorry about the small delay there, but we should be getting into picks and bans very shortly, and we can finally put to rest some of these questions that we've been asking back and forth about what style of draft these two teams are going to pick up. I'm particularly excited to see what we're going to be seeing from the jungle. I mean, I already think we've had a decent discussion about the two different kinds of picks. We haven't even touched on the fact that Twig already has shown that he likes going to this Hombats, and Hombats has been popping off this week.
Has so far, but whether or not he's willing to go back towards it, I think it is up to the Camelot Kings and where they're going to put some of their early game pieces. A thing about the Kings draft is, even though it is generally late game slanted, they will have something that can match pressure throughout the early. So if they've got a really slow mid laner, let's say, for example, Big Man Tings decides he wants to play something like the Morgan Le Fay or the Morrigan, gods that generally struggle in the early game, then we'll see Twig play in a more aggressive selection, or they'll have Netroid and Genetics play a more aggro duo lane that can absorb some of the, I suppose, the attention of their opposition. So the Camelot Kings are a team, maybe more so than any other, that I think put a lot of thought into their drafts. They really do strategize on where they want to land this aggression, what portion of the game they're looking towards, and how they're going to get there. Whereas I feel like some of these other squads in the league, not the Tartarus Titans, but some other teams in the league, will say, all right, we're going to make an early game draft, and then we'll get 5 early game pieces. Oh, we'll get a late game draft, and like 5 late game pieces, and it makes it very difficult to execute on some of those compositions. So I think you're right to highlight the jungle as maybe the largest change from the last time we've seen these two teams. Camelot Kings could go towards the Hunbots. I think it is pretty unlikely that Layers reprises the Erlongs and the Shivas.
Well, no more discussing. Well, I say no more discussing. No more theorizing. Let's head into the pudding, and that's where the proof is, in fact, between these two teams, Titans and Kings. Heading into picks and bans, Titans on the left side of your screen are going to get that first option. It will be the Emoja taken away. They have no interest in playing it. Kings don't want to play against the Chernobog. Baron Samity already banned out here.
Yeah, Baron's been seeing a whole lot of priority recently. It's just that in-combat healing, so valuable. You can really start to make these team fights in the late game favor you. I mean, essentially like 400 burst healing for yourself and your entire team if you're landing that second ability consistently. Also acts as a ranged initiator and can hold his own in a majority of lanes. I mean, literally every single lane. Mid, you can play him in solo, you could play him in the support role. So Baron Samity very quickly rising in the power rankings for all of these teams, and the Tartarus Titans have taken note and said, let's just not deal with that. And I suppose just a good ban out, because we haven't really seen the Titans play this pick at all.
Yeah, no, I got to agree with you, yeah, for sure. And the Kings are going to take away the AMC as well, which has been a very popular mid lane pickup for just across the board in general. Has a lot of utility, especially in this very heavy ADC-based meta that we've been seeing developed. This AMC definitely can cause problems in that middle lane. Mercury is taken away, and now, Mivlin, if I was looking at a spreadsheet of all the auto-attack based junglers out there, I'm not sure I would prioritize the Mercury first, but this is something we've been seeing both games so far.
Yeah, I think Mercury is just incredibly strong right now. I mean, the ability to go towards crit so early on, if you so choose, will allow you to play these more ability-based hunters. If you're going to run a double physical composition with 2 auto attackers, generally if your jungler is building crit, you want to have a hunter that doesn't necessarily have to do that themselves,
Oh, hey,
which would
fam.
lean towards things like the Uul or even the AMC to a certain extent. Not going to be the case here, as AMC and Mercury are both banned out. And the Tartarus
the
Titans,
hunt begin.
ever students of the meta, go ahead and just take one of the most consistent lock-ins you can in a first slot, Jingwei. Not only is going to bring you phenomenal late game scaling with the explosive bolts and the synergy that brings with some of these crit style builds, but also one of the safer selections in the dual lane. You don't have to concern yourselves about the aggression from the Camelot Kings too often. But I am surprised to see the Kings prioritize this Artemis so high up in their draft. Maybe they don't think Artemis has like the worst matchups on the planet. I'd argue that walls make it very difficult to be Artemis in general. But with Jingwei already locked in, and Jingwei is not one of those hunters that flexes towards mid or towards the jungle. Generally, when that's locked, you know it's going to the dedicated hunter player of that squad. You could allow the Kings, or see the Kings, hold off on that Artemis selection at least a little bit, because Artemis isn't going mid either. I think they could have very well taken it in this slot and looked at potentially the Jing Shen for themselves, or even the Uller if they had wanted that.
Maybe, but they very clearly have an idea here, right? They're opting for this Ymir very early on. I'm not sure if I like this pickup so early. It's very abusable here in the support role. We already saw how badly supports can get abused last game with the Neilmar on Geb.
Titular.
The titular Neilmar. But he got really pressured out, and this Ymir has even less utility in forms of ways to get out, ways to protect himself. Just a little bit more of a vulnerable pick, and this Jing Chen is going to be able to scoop him up and throw him back. The Titans actually, at the moment, Mifflin, are drafting basically blow for blow so far what Leviathans picked up last game.
Yeah, that double hunter composition just scales so incredibly well. Jing Chen gonna mitigate a lot of the efficacy of Artemis. Vengeful Assault
even know
sure
who
might
you're
make you
fighting?
slow immune, but doesn't immune the damage reduction from the Ferocious Roar. Bellona similarly gonna find herself in that exact same situation, as will Ymir. So if this is Jing Chen slated for support, this double auto-attacker conversation around Artemis and Ymir with that Frostbite passive means that Jing Chen's gonna find a whole lot of value from his first ability. But looking at the potential once ganks start rolling through for the Camelot Kings, you've already got some of the, if not one of the, most ridiculous CC combos in the game. Freeze into a trap, or Caledonian Boar initiation into a wall, into a trap, into a freeze, into a slow,
Into a Robo
another
Invicta.
slow, into another slow, because the ultimate from Ymir and the Glacial Strike and the Suppress the Insolent makes it very, very difficult for anyone who tries to commit onto a kill into that dual lane of the Kings. If they aren't shutting down one of these two targets, either Ymir or Artemis, the re-engage, the reinitiation that the Camelot Kings have already drafted is incredibly strong. That said, Jingwei is very safe, does have the CC immunity in the ultimate as well as the dash to get out of some of these situations, but how often is Jing Shen initiating with leaps? How often is Uhl closing gap in that axe stance and immediately changing into the bow stance, losing access to his own leap? I think there are certainly opportunities for the Camelot Kings to counterpunch with the draft that they've got.
So far, yeah, and I really like the bans here on the second round from the Camelot Kings. They take away the Nemesis, which is going to be a huge threat to this Ymir with the Shred, with the slows. So really good to take that off the table. I think the Hades as well, there's a lot of immobility on this Kings roster so far, so I like the Hades pick away. The new Wa getting picked up here for BMT in the mid lane. This is something that I don't think we've seen so far this week, or if we have, very rarely and very scarcely. I don't dislike this pickup into this draft.
Yeah, Nuwa's got one of the counter matchups into Uhl, one of the older counter matchups in that Uhl's pretty telegraphed when he's going to aggress. He pulls out some axes, right? And he's going to throw at least one of them at you. Nuwa can just spawn minions in front of her and make it nearly impossible to land that stun. So some opportunity there, CC immunity in the ultimate. But my concern for the Nuwa lock-in is that the Tartarus Titans, if they so choose, could just draft a wall. One wall stops every single one of these picks for the Camelot Kings. None of them are capable of dealing with man-made structures, which could create these opportunities to lock off these jungle fights. Oleron may not spawn a wall, but he spawns a wall of time dilation, and, well, there's not really the greatest repositioning tools on the Camelot Kings, so I think Sanctified Field going to find a whole lot of value. Hunbots very easily going to be able to maneuver the map. It's a double-edged sword. Sure, Nuwa can block a thrown axe, but tanking up a Sacred Monkey Toss, you're only spawning at most 3 minions. It's got 4 bounces, which means that it should always make its way to at least one enemy god or at least Nuwa in some of these team fights, allowing this Hunbots to reposition very easily. This is a dangerous draft for the Camelot Kings. If the Kings can get to the late game team fight from even, I really do like their odds in a jungle engagement. I really like their odds in a base defense or even offense situation. But this is a draft from the Tartarus Titans that, if they are allowed to establish a lead, the triple auto-attacker scaling of Uhl, Jingwei, and Oleron is just going to be so hard to contend with, not only around neutral objectives, but also in these team fights.
I think there's some good utility, though, in the counterplay by the Camelot Kings. The Carly, very, very good at getting onto this Oleron. You know, has the ability to lock him down, can't get knocked away when she's in that destruction, the ultimate by Oleron's 3, that push away. So I think there's a lot of options to try and keep this Oleron down in the mid lane, and I think it's safe to assume this will be going into that mid lane. Although that being said, it does raise the question, one of these characters has to go into solo, and I think Jing Chen is pretty easily slotted into that support role. So Mifflin, Oleron, actually, I got to take it back. I can't assume the Oleron's going into mid, because this could very easily be SOT.
Yeah, I think Oleron is most likely headed for the solo lane, just allowed to scale up pretty long. We've seen in the SCC and during some of these SPL matches that solo laners are very similar to the hunters in duo nowadays, especially in 9-5, insofar as pacing of the lane and when they're looking to rotate out. I'm thinking about all these Hades lock-ins where you don't see the Hades leave lane until the Bumba's hammer is finished. I think that Oleron very similarly is probably going to just sit in that short lane until he's level 20 and then try and work his way into these team fights. But some of that counterplay that you bring up, sure, Kali's knock up immune and destruction. She still has to get into melee range on an Oleron who could just drop a giant sanctified field on his own feet. So I think that is going to be one of the hardest pieces for the Camelot Kings to deal with, in particular, is this Oleron. That's not to say that they haven't got initiation potential. I think it's really going to come down to genetics play on this Ymir, on whether or not he can find the walls to force out the Sanctified Field defensively. If the Tartarus Titans are allowed to choose their positioning, if they're allowed to drop Sanctified Field aggressively just about ever, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Kings to reestablish their footing. Unless this Kali is finding massive waves, unless she's finding priority targets every single time, which is an incredibly hard ask considering how slippery this backline of the Tartarus Titans is and how good their disengage can be if they so choose. Fear No Evil, Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, Sanctified Field, all massive no-play zones that you can just drop on the retreat and make it so hard for the Kings to chase out.
Well, and on top of that, not on top of that, contrary to that though, Mifflin, let's highlight this drop from Titans is going to have the same issue that we saw from through the Oni Warriors last game. That is, this Jing Chen will be the only frontline, whereas the Kings, they have a lot of options here. They have a decent amount of shred as well. This Kali's going to be doing a lot of damage once that kin size comes online, same with the Artemis. Nuwa will surely go into that Soul Reaver as well. So the Tartarus Titans, sure, if they are able to find the aggressive positioning and can use that Sanctified Field in an aggressive way, should be in a good position. But alternatively, if they're on the defensive, they don't have a lot keeping the Kings away from that backline.
I think the difference is that the Oni Warriors not only were using main tank Geb, like the only dedicated defensive character, but Geb on his own is not good at that role. Geb is a facilitator. He wants to play in that back line, use that stone shield to help out his team. And if he does initiate, generally it's going to be burning beads to set up for somebody else. Whereas the Tartarus Titans, sure, have only got the one dedicated tank with Jing Shen. Jing Chen's initiation is Blink, Whirlwind of Rage and Steel. If it goes great, phenomenal, you may have found a pick. If it goes poorly, you still have a double leap to escape. You've got follow-up initiation. Sure, not a tank, but a Blink Hunbot's ultimate goes a whole long way in some of these team fights. Oleron can drop Sanctified Field on the disengage, so if you're chasing out a Jing Chen who has put himself out of position to initiate some of these fights, you're chasing him into time dilation. I think that you're right to bring up that it has got parallels with the Oni Warriors draft in that they both do only have just the one dedicated. But I would argue if you're going to have only one dedicated tank, Jing Chen probably pretty up there on the tier list to be that initiator. And the Tartarus Titans won't be struggling insofar as initiation just because of this Hunbot's pick. I really think that there's going to be a whole lot of value from Fear No Evil, especially into this draft for the Camelot Kings. Again, four largely immobile gods who are going to have a massive target on their backs in every single one of these team fights. Beads probably going to be used the majority of the time before level 12, before you can get that second relic, and then you're really relying on CC immune ultimates to evade everything else. This could be a conversation about Magi's Blessing for the Kings and whether or not they want to itemize towards that very early. But this draft from the Tartarus Titans is CC heavy, just from some of these ultimates. And even then, it's not just up to Jing Chen, it's not just up to Hunbots to burn away those defensive capacities, but also the Uhl can do it, generally single target with the Axe Toss. Jingwei, not so much, but if you are in a situation where you need the beads or make sure you're not getting knocked up, Jingwei can do it herself. Oleron with Sanctified Field. Beads will save you from it for a moment, and only for a moment. I think the Titans have got themselves a very scary composition, only if they're able to get to that 15-20 minute mark. This draft is not great until that point.
But counter to that, you know, the Kings also have really strong late game team fight. I mean, I'm looking at the Artemis, maybe the strongest team fight ability coming from a Hunter role at the very least, the Caledonian Boar. Potential to stun all 5 of these members from the Tartarus Titans very easily, can chain through. Nuwa has a lot of guaranteed global damage, and I mean, if we're looking at late game characters, you've got the titular one right there in name of Kali. This is a character that, you know, we know that Captain Twig can play. We've already talked about the Arachne and the propensity to lean into these auto-attack based junglers already. The Kali more than fits that role. So I got to ask you, Mifflin, in a head-to-head late-game team fight, post 20 minutes, is it a toss-up? Is it leaning one way or another?
Well, it depends on how well the Tartarus Titans are playing, I think.
Sure.
If you're evaluating just power ranking of both of these compositions, I think they both scale very well come late game. So when that's the case, I like to have the conversation of ease of play. And one composition is largely pretty standard, whereas the other composition is a triple hunter composition. You've got Jingwei, you've got Oleron, you've got Uhl, all need to be on point at every single team fight, at every single engagement, making sure that they're communicating their targets incredibly well, that they can connect with these high priority targets. That's not easy to do when you're all three ranged auto attackers. Whereas on the other side, the Camelot Kings, I think, a little bit more simple in how they need to address the team fight.
We are going to have to wait a little bit longer to see how these two comps are going to look in the straight hash out, because we're unfortunately going to have to go back to another break. But when we come back this time, ladies and gentlemen, we will be heading into game number 2 of today. So stick around and find out later.
Whatever, and I would never hear. You've been flexing everywhere. Girl, look in the mirror. Man, you so dirty. Yeah, you look so dirty. You were never worthy. Lately, it's you. You stole your peace, put it on me. But baby, it's you. Lie like a ride, but take your stuff back. Baby, it's you. Baby, it's you. If I control the weather, then every day would rain on your parade. Shine you can't chase, yeah. If I was Father Time, then I would change the day. So I never saw your face. Please, what do I have to do to make you go? Baby, it's you. It's you. It's you. It's you.
disagree. It's almost like when we first met. Oh, I don't care, it's getting too late. I want you and I can't wait. Don't wanna spend a minute without you. I know you feel the same. So come on, give me love. I'ma show you how to move with my body. Come hit me with your touch and make me wanna say, damn. And yeah, you know what's up. Ain't nothing I won't do for your body. So give me all you got right now. I know I'm yours, baby. So come give me love. You know you're mine, baby. So come give me love. I never felt nothing quite like this. I get a high every time we kiss. Can't get enough, baby. So come give me love. All of your love, I can't fake it. When I'm with you, my legs go weak. Hey, can you hear it? I think my heart just skipped a beat. Yeah. This feeling is getting so strong. Love me till the morning, love me all night long. There's something special about you. You're the one that I want. So come on, give me love. I'ma show you how to move with my body. Come hit me with your touch and make me wanna say, damn. And yeah, you know what's up. Ain't nothing I won't do for your body. So give me all you got right now. I know I'm yours, baby. So come give me love. You know you're mine, baby. So come give me love. I never felt nothing quite like this. I get a high every time we kiss. Can't get enough, baby. So come give me love. All of your love. Won't you love me till the morning? Love me in the evening. You know what I want. Won't you hold me like I'm yours? Show me that I'm yours. You know just what I want. Won't you love me like the last time? Like our time was right now. Show me what it's about. Love me till the morning. Love me in the evening. You know what I want. I know I'm yours, baby. So come give me love. You know you're mine, baby. So come give me love. I never felt nothing quite like this. I get a high every time we kiss. Can't get enough, babe. So come give me love. All of your love. Won't you love me till the morning? Love me in the evening. You know what I want. Won't you hold me like I'm yours? Show me that I'm yours. You know just what I want. Won't you love me like the last time? Like our time was right now. Show me what it's about. Love me till the morning. Love me in the evening. You know what I want. All of your love.
everybody, and welcome back to SMITE Mass. We're jumping straight into the game with the Tartarus Titans and the Camelot Kings. Apologies for the difficulties, but now we should be good to go. It's J-Mac, it's Gore here for our game 1 of the best of 1 between these two teams. And it's not going to be the solo run that we were maybe kind of speculating between us and the desk. It's going to be SOT on Uller solo.
And he's been playing a lot of this pick, man. Not necessarily in the Pro League, but like you go into his stream, you watch, anytime he's in a game, you might, well, you're more than likely going to see an Uller over there, at least every now and then. So it's something that I expect to work really well. I'm curious the matchup it'll have against Bologna. The silence is going to be a little annoying, right, early on. But for the most part, we've always talked about it, Uller is a little more ability-based than most of the other hunters, so it's not like it's going to cripple him too badly in the lane. He's going to have no mana problems because he's got a blue buff. Honestly, it feels like he's kind of made for solo lane, except for the fact that he's not that tanky. So this will be fun to watch. And late game, you still have a second hunter. Technically a third hunter if you want to look at Uller Run as kind of like a magical hunter. And so in this way, you've got a lot of damage that's just going to be joining the fray a little bit later on.
Why do I feel like this was a Cyclone-inspired pick? Because Cyclone, I remember, used to run this pick in solo up against this same kind of matchup between, like, Ullers and Aokwongs. Maybe there was some influence from the dual lane of the Tartarus Titans to get SOT to play that pick over there. But with the triple auto attack between the Ul, between the Jingwei, and the Uller Run, definitely looking at the Kings to build some anti-attack speed as we get towards the late game.
Yeah, I'm looking for Horrifics. I'm looking for Witchblades. I'm looking for anything that's going to slow them down even a little bit to try and make things better. And you've got enough auto attackers on your team that you could probably build up into things that are going to enhance your side as well. You know, get like what your Shoguns, things like that, to try and make you feel a little bit better. But realistically, I think like what you said, just try to limit it as much as possible. That's part of why the Xingqian pick for the Titans works so well. If Genetics was able to have a pick like that, where you already are going to make them just deal less damage with your Furious Roar, then that's a huge win for your team. Here you have to do it the old-fashioned way and just hope that the coffers end up giving you enough gold to afford it.
You have the 2v2 matchup in the mid between Paul and Layers against Big Man and Captain Twig. And it definitely feels like the Titans have a little bit more of that early game slant to themselves, namely with the Hunt Bats, level 5, instantly he can come online. Whereas the Camelot Kings feel like theirs is maybe more towards the late game, and this is where the early game comes in big. Layers needs a couple more shots, but he won't find it up against Captain Twig. Good body blocks by BMT keeps him from falling down.
I mean, like, should have been a kill. If it had been a kill, maybe a really easy start for the Titans, because like you had just said, if you hit 5 first on Layers, 5 first on Paul, all of a sudden you've got a great team fight central on the map for you. That's going to slow things down. You do still knock Twig out into the jungle, but he's a Kali and he's a jungler. He's going to be able to get enough farm and enough healing from killing off these Harpies that it's not going to be the end of the world for him. And as you can see, he's mostly just fine with it. In fact, if anything, he might be getting something out of this, and he's going for a speed buff steal.
He's serious. I mean, SOT will get his blue buff, but the fact that Captain Twig legitimately just almost died in the 2v2 mid and has now stolen away back Harpies twice, I believe, from Layers, and have now stolen away his speed buff. Layers not going to be too happy about that, but Captain Twig only just now hit that level 3 mark, where Layers have been sitting at level 3 for a little bit.
Yeah, so a little farther behind in terms of overall experience, but that should be able to get him a lot closer, right? Like stripping away essentially the entire right side jungle and then still going back to your own buffs. It's going to be a little bit of a farm game, maybe not expecting any huge ganks right now from Twig, but who is? It's Akali at level 3. You're not really like expecting these game-changing plays. And you know that Layers isn't going to be active early on. Hunbats loves to farm a little bit early. He wants to get that ult online, wants to wait a little bit longer. So I think this is going to be a good pace. Still potentially favoring the Kings, although late game, it gets to this weird mental math late game. And I'm not going to do it because I don't know what to expect out of any of them. Because when it comes down to it, Kali is a wild card, and you've got 3 hunters on the field that at any given time, any of them can pop off.
Something that we've been seeing a lot of from these auto attack junglers has been this Golden Blade, now picked up by Captain Twig. Been helping some of the lower clear assassins be able to fully clear out themselves with how tanky the jungle has gotten. It seems that this item has become a big favorite amongst a lot of players.
And honestly, it's so clean, I guess is the way to describe it. It's going to help you, you know, with a lot of these camps now being a little tankier, a little harder to take down early on. That means you're going to be able to clear a lot better and quicker. But if you're, you know, you're someone like Kali who already has decent clear on these camps, it just means that you're going to be able to get the farm faster, then get proactive into the map. And so, you know, you clear these mid camps on right. And then if you happen to be in a good position, you can then attack Paul, or you can go for something else. You're going to get your farm online a lot faster. You're going to feel a little more comfortable and fluid in the jungle, and it's going to open up more gank opportunities for Twig here.
And with how much time that Captain Twig has spent inside of the jungle away from big man Tings, that's allowed BMT to get about a half-level lead up over Paul in the mid lane. Starting up towards that Doom Orb, and a rotation towards the blue buff. Captain Twig won't be able to find anything there. SOT can secure his buff thanks to the help of Layers. But I'm going to be keeping my eyes over towards this mid lane with this new Watts pick we saw one time last week, and didn't do so hot, to say the least. It existed when it came out to the late game, but it is something that, you know, the desk kind of talked a little bit more about with this god, so I definitely will be keeping my eyes kind of glued towards this mid lane matchup.
I love Nuwa. She's very middling is the way I want to term it, right? Like she's sometimes going to provide exactly what your team needs from a mage, and you're going to be able to find it. Of course, there's always the meme, you know, with her ult and things like that, but her damage can be pretty surprising. And it's all around the clay minions, and you know, right now, like, you're not going to see too much, I think, from Tings. The clay minions themselves aren't going to be providing much more than just bodies, but later on, you get a little bit of prot shred if you detonate those, plus the stun, and so all of a sudden, it's going to come through. If I remember correctly, it might just be magical prot shred, but either way, you're getting more damage now from just this new Wa that is going to be able to come through. So yeah, dash magical prots reduced per stack. And so it can be a lot at the very end of you know, a late game team fight. And so when you're looking at just Aurora as this tank, all of a sudden Tings is going to be able to just blow him up unless he, you know, divots a couple of items or maybe just one really good item over towards magical protection to try and help deal with this new off.
Well, I am noticing something. Maybe an item that's not, you know, a stranger to the supports, but maybe a stranger to being a first pick for the supports. Most traditionally, we've been seeing Gauntlet of Thebes come as a first item, but it's Spirit Robe immediately out the gate for both of them.
And honestly, look, Spirit Robe, 40 magical and physical prots, you get CCR. It's just a good item, and I think it's this weird balancing point where right now you need to deal with CC pretty heavy early on because of the time to kill, being able to get, not only with the DR changes from, what, a few patches ago, now having CCR on top of all of that. Theoretically, you're going to get caught out a lot less right now. You're not going to be the person who's stalled out, who's going to get farmed up, and it's going to keep you alive a little bit longer. I'm actually really interested that there's a Watchers on one side and a Benevolence on the other, just because, you know, from what Genetics is playing with the Benevolence, we've been seeing that a lot more often lately.
Wall just missed on the Cyclone. The freeze does hit him through the knockup. Cyclone holding on to that ultimate until the last moment needed to dive under his tier 1 tower. He'll get back to safety and not lose out on anything because of it. Ultimate, sure, does suck, but beads are still up for the Jing Wei. Variety stunned down the solo lane. Aurora will jump under the tier 1 tower, but not use that ultimate. Not trying to bait out that Eagles rally.
I feel like they could have continued that chase and pretty easily gotten that kill. Although Variety, like you said, has his ult available, so maybe if you commit an ult, you get an ult for an ult trade. Still feels like it could have been worthwhile. Either way, you get the teleport, you burn something down, and you get some pressure over into the long lane. Your Ullr's 21 stacks in on Transcendence, so maybe not looking at like the most power spiky portion of the game for him. And so at this point, I kind of like where the Titans are putting their pressure. They're making sure that the Kings know don't run the show just yet, but they're not quite, I think, applying the full pressure that they could, especially with the ults they have. But this is very much a King-style and Titan-style game where you're not looking, especially with these drafts, for crazy early game team fights, even level 5 team fights, despite the fact that the Titans have such fantastic team fight ultimates. You're just kind of patiently running until it's going to open up, and soon enough, I think that we're going to start seeing a little more pressure coming down from the Kali.
Layers and Paul pushed all the way at the tower. That's going to get a freeze from Genetics and some poke out of Captain Twig, but no punish onto the jungler for sitting so far up in this mid lane. I noticed that the Chalice was sitting on the floor there behind the Pyromancer pit, and I'm curious how long that thing was sitting there before it finally got picked up, but it's not often that we get to see, well, maybe so or more so in this patch now we actually do get to see this a little bit, But it's so strange to see a jungler in a mid pushed at the tier 1 tower line. One gets frozen, and then nothing happens right after.
Right. And like they just kind of walk away, meander. I mean, even here, this wall, like, it's a great wall, but it doesn't really do much in terms of pressure. I mean, it's going to get Aurora to fall back, and that's where a lot of the questionable plays, I think, are going to come from both of these teams. I think the Kings love this pace of game anyway, so this isn't necessarily surprising for a game of theirs, but it is a little surprising to see, again, you know, when you've got Sanctified Fields, you've got this Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, you've got the Fear No Evil, 3 huge ults in mid that are disruptive, and not a single one has been used yet. They're not really farming for any of those. They haven't pulled any beads, and yeah, you know, Tings and Genetics both have it, but it feels like they could be a little more proactive if you're the Titans. But that's just the way things have shifted, right? Right now, it's not about that. It's going to take a little too much to try and find those kills. And instead, save those ults for something big, like a Gold Fury, like a Pyromancer when it spawns in a few seconds. All of a sudden, then you've got these huge fight-changing ultimates around a huge game-changing objective.
We're 10 minutes in the game, and the only ultimate that has been used, and I'm not counting SOT's stance, which that one doesn't count. The only ult that's been used in 10 minutes has been Cyclones when he used Airstrike to go under his tower. Maybe we'll see something here at the Pyromancer with the Titans starting it up. Pyro down to 30% HP. Big Man Tings with an attempted steal over the wall. But the Tartarus Titans will secure the Pyro. Variety and Big Man on the chase, but nothing further. Just a couple of soldiers out of BMT.
And there's going to be like the upsides and downsides of the Clay Soldiers, which is like, man, if he gets that dash, it gets the slow, you get the prod shred, you're in there for the fight. You don't, I'm backing up, and that's exactly what ends up happening. Unfortunate for them, and unfortunate that they ended up watching that. I think it was Variety and Tings going for the steal, but it is a pretty easy Pyromancer for the Titans, and those are the kind of calls I think you have to be aware with here if you're the Kings. It's not a huge like game changer right now, but you stack one Pyro with a Gold Fury and then maybe a second Pyro by the time it respawns, and suddenly the Titans will have a very comfortable lead. So they have to be a little more aware, I think, of these rotations, and specifically when they're falling behind.
We are 2 items deep on some of these gods right now. Still haven't seen any kind of real fight breakdown aside from the early mid 2v2 skirmish, the gank over in left lane. So Gore, if you're the Titans and you have this massive 3v3, I mean, Sanctified Field, Fear No Evil, Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, probably 3 of the best fight ultimates that you could ever ask for out of the Titans. What's the point that they finally pull the trigger and use these?
So right now, I think they just need, if it's whether it's pressure in the duo lane or pressure in mid, as long as they can either kill or force Netruid or Tings out of the fight, someone backs, probably the Uller, right, hits the Trebuchet and gets it to start marching down, then that's like the freest Gold Fury in the world, right? Because either you're going to get the Gold Fury and they aren't going to risk the fight because you've got way too many strong ults, or they're going to come into your insanely strong ults, probably lose the fight, and lose a tower over there on right because of the pressure. So I really like that they're like holding onto the Trebuchet, they're keeping presence on the map, but a lot of that all depends on getting a little pressure over there in the duo. You can't do it in the full 5v5. I think even if you send the Trebuchet forward now, you're not really giving yourselves the full advantage that you could have. Having like the teleport available there on Nika, although right now on cooldown, so maybe it's a little bit of an opening, but I think realistically you need to out-pressure somebody. If you get a kill onto Twig, Tings, potentially Netruid, maybe Genetics, although that one seems like it's going to be a little bit harder. I think anything that happens over there opens things up.
The Kings who start at the Gold Fury, absolutely no vision, and the Kings know that they can take this with ease. The second objective of the game will go to the Chaos team this time around, and that will re-even up that gold lead that the Titans have been able to build for themselves. That's not saying much because we only hit 1,000, but it's back to dead even at 13 in. No kills, no deaths across the board for either of these teams.
I'll be honest with you, I expected a lot more of an explosive Gold Fury than what we got.
It like, just kind of happened.
Yeah, they just kind of walked up and did it. And the new ult ends up paying dividends because all you need from it is the vision. You don't even care too much about the damage itself. It's just, hey, where are they right now? And the minute you find out you're clear, everything was smooth sailing. So the Kings just kind of good map awareness all around. And keeping things as even as it is, and specifically the pace that it is, this benefits. Man, who does this benefit? I'm still trying to do that late game equation math, but it's like Kali is someone that can be, especially when Twig's playing her, absolutely the end of the game for you. I mean, she can just run through your team. But you've got 2 hunters and one that's a mage that builds the same way, right? An auto attacker in the middle of it. You already see a Witchblade coming online on one side, so the Kings are starting to deal with it a little bit. But I think you're going to need a lot more to try and slow a team pace like the Titans are going to have down.
Well, now we finally have potentially a death on this left side. Cyclone Spin should not be able to get out of this one. He will go down to Captain Twig. And 14.5 minutes in the game, Gore, we finally have our first blood and our first tower going down. A response from the Titans to take the right side tier 1.
I wouldn't mind seeing them put more pressure on this left hand or this right hand side, whether it's in the jungle or just the tower. They've got the Trebuchet coming up with another full minion wave. They've got Variety on the ropes, and you've got a few seconds to work with.
Fear no evil gets the beads out of Variety. Captain Twig now forced to rotate over, and now the Camelot Kings have to answer to the Trebuchet. Netroid will grab a tier 1 of his own, while the Tartarus Titans will just let the Trebuchet push on itself. It's not going to get very far. It's not going to get a whole lot of value here. Tier 1 towers trade out. 1 kill goes to the Camelot Kings. And when we look at the gold lead, it's barely even 500 up for the Kings now.
Yeah, that first blood bounty essentially taken away by the tower, right? So ultimately, you're kind of ahead-ish. I think really what we're learning from the Kings is that they are not only willing to be proactive, but I think being smart about where they're being proactive. The Gold Fury play was a huge eye-opener for just map control, but then they get a good kill onto specifically Cyclone Spin. Now they're open for a Pyromancer, and Sot and Layers can't really jump into this the way you would if Sot was like a warrior.
It's a couple of steal opportunities, but the Kings, or specifically Genetics, will throw that wall up and stop anything from passing through. So the Camelot Kings grab their second objective. Second Pyromancer of the game goes to them. And then continue to push up that gold lead. Titans will try and respond with a tier 1, but probably the most obnoxious ability to deal with to try and push that tower is going to be Genetics with this Ymir. That wall stops the push from the Titans.
Yeah, that wall is going to be such a nuisance for a lot of people as well. I mean, technically, you've got good leaps on, what, 3 people, 4 people on the Titans, so most of them should be able to get away. But Genetics is patient, and Genetics is very, very damning on this Ymir. So if you leap in or something goes wrong on Layers, then all of a sudden you're locked away. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities outside of just the, hey, we can kill Paul pretty easily, where I think this Ymir is going to be kind of a thorn in their side, let alone factoring in the fact that Ymir, like, base state is, I believe, the tankiest god in the game at, like, just base scaling. Then you add in the fact that he's just gonna be tanky. I think there's gonna be a lot to burn through on the front line, and Genetics is gonna be a huge hulking portion of that.
So I want to reel it back to the waiting room that we had earlier today, where you're asking,
man, do you
think the games are going to be going longer because, you know, or do you think they'll be shorter because the SCC teams versus SPL? I want to put an asterisk on my answer before where I thought it was just long because of the SCC. I forgot about the Camelot Kings also really love playing this late game style of draft. So there's my asterisk. If our game's going to go long, no, unless it's the Camelot Kings, because they love making these kinds of plays. SOT finds a stun up against Captain Twig. And that's gonna be, I thought there was going to be something, but no, they just get the stun, get the beads, and out.
Well, now we're entering, and this is the weirdest part of SMITE, I think, not only for casting, but really like watching. Because there hasn't been a lot of action between the last 17.5 minutes, right? And so really we're entering the point where some people are just going to get absolutely shredded, and it's going to come as what feels like a surprise no matter what. Even if you're expecting it, it's going to be a little quicker than you imagine because you haven't gotten to see the full like evolution slowly growing as they get their items. It's just a full-on, you're just now getting to see what Akali can do with 3 items, right? You just get the drop in.
Whoa, Tartarus Titans pull a fire. A quick call by BMT with the ultimate will spot that it's happening, but it's all 5 of the Titans here. Variety, the only one who can try and seal. The Sanctified Field is out. Variety goes in, but he does not secure that one. He gets shredded away. Finally, the Titans put themselves on the board. And maybe a bit overkill to take him down.
Yeah, I think he was dead, but they did drop a few more ults just to make sure and guarantee it. You're going to get a Primal Fury, so if you're the Kings, it's not the end of the world, but a Fire Giant 20 minutes in with nobody defending, that should be at least the free tier 2. They might be able to get Phoenix pressure on this side of the map as well. Plus, you have to factor in Trebuchet sitting there on the left-hand side, so they've got something to push with alongside this Fire Giant. This is going to be a huge gold swing in favor of the Titans, plus they're going to have a lot of capabilities once they fall back to base.
If not for the fact that Genetics is on Ymir, I think the Titans may have continued that push, but that one little wall, once again, will slow down the Tartarus Titans from their continued push on the right side, which is where the only place on the map they've really put pressure has been these Pyromancers. This one fire giant they got taken seemingly out of nowhere, but the Titans, I'm not sure who the shot caller was for that one, but props to them for grabbing that.
I mean, it's exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? Where we were saying, like, hey, like I mentioned it around a Gold Fury. They just happened to wait 18 minutes and instead do it around a Fire Giant. But you've got Fear No Evil, Sanctified Fields, Whirlwind of Rage and Steel. Like, ignoring the fact that Uller and Jingwei can join the fight and really make things favored for you, you've got great team fight potential. Force them to come to you, and that's exactly what the Kings couldn't do there. Is like, step up. Try to fight. Yes, you've got all these beads, but can you make that rotation, A, in time, and B, is it going to be worth everything you have to invest? I think they've got a decent enough defensive composition that they don't have to worry too much about it, and I like that they're being proactive. I mean, this is the second, third objective that they've gotten while the Titans have had this FG buff, but they are going to be losing out. Trebuchet slowly but surely making its way up left. Tier 1 on left is going to get knocked down, so the gold is going to start pouring in towards the Titans. They're going to be able to spin that, catch up, and then eventually maybe shut down some of what the Kings have in terms of defense practice.
Look at this split by the Titans. They send 2 to the left line to take out the Tier 1 tower, and then 3 up the mid to take out both of those towers. And with that Trebuchet now pushing up, and the gold now climbing to a 1K lead, which is so wild to say that
a whopping 1,000!
A whopping 1,000 gold lead, the largest gold lead of this game, and it could expand maybe just a bit more if this Tier 2 tower goes down. But it's a 5-strong grouping of the Camelot Kings around this Tier 2. They're not going to let it go for free, and that Trebuchet only gets a couple of shots.
Yeah, I think they maybe could have body blocked. It's a really difficult decision to make there if you take any shots for that Trebuchet, but they let Netroid step up. Netroid has no real issues shredding through the objective, and like you said, only 2 shots that end up on that Tier 2. It's still a little open, but I like that the Kings are stepping up here. Tier 2s, I mean, with the health bonus, with the damage bonus, it's not going to be an easy siege for them, and you had highlighted this earlier, but Genetics, I love that he keeps using this wall for that. All that's doing is blocking this range damage, it's stopping damage from falling onto the tower, and it's making the Titans have to choose to commit a little harder for their push. Downside, Solar Troll split pushing.
Once again, Genetics will slow down the push of the Titans. That does let SOT, or not even really go for the Phoenix, instead just go for raw damage up against Captain Twig, half HP on the Kali, and falling fast as SOT keeps pelting more and more abilities there. That's going to force Variety to rotate over and now deal with his solo lane opposition. That leaves a 3-3 split on the left side of the map. As long as Genetics is there, the Titans really don't have much push that they can go with just because of this on repeat.
Yeah, that has to be the most obnoxious thing. Finally, they get in there and get the tower down, but Genetics slowed them down a lot. And just the presence of the Kings, I think if you don't have Variety rotating in, that tower's probably still standing. But you have to think of the value. I mean, it's a 2,000 gold difference from the beginning of that Fire Giant power play to the end of it. It barely comes in favor of the Titans at the end of it. And it's just because, I mean, what, they swung 5 towers there, right? That they were able to pick up. And so able to get a lot of gold. It burns down this FG, though, and so the Kings, yes, you're in a worse spot. Your Phoenix in mid is a little weak. They still got a lot of towers over there. Admittedly, the ults are still super strong on the side of the Titans, but you've got all your relics. You didn't really have to fight tooth and nail to make sure that your base didn't crack open. And now you can step up to the Fire Giant in 30 seconds. You can look for the vision game in the middle around the FG pit, try to get some wards deep while they are resetting themselves. And then you can reset and come back in. You've got a great, I think, late game composition, assuming that you can get good damage out of your mage and you can get this Kali in the right position. Otherwise, the Titans, I mean, we saw what they can do, and the quickest of instances in a 1v5. I think that the Kings have to be very well present for a lot of this, and ideally get a pick to make sure that things can go much easier in their favor to turn this game around.
I gotta hand it to the Kings. The fact they've lost all 6 of their towers, a Fire Giant, a Gold Fury early in the game, and they are still only 2,000 gold down compared to the Titans at this stage, is a really good showing of the macro play that we are constantly talking about with this Camelot Kings team. But now, we finally have a group up around the Fire Giant. We'll see if the Titans can get it as freely as they did last time. Definitely can't, because there's actually people here But how will the fight go now as SOT loses his beads right away to Captain Twig?
You've got a lot of high damaging auto attackers on the side of the Titans. If they are able to turn everyone's attention to the FG, it's going to burn too quickly for the Kings to respond as much as they or as well as they would like. The good news is that it's almost impossible to get all three of them just looking at FG and win the team fight afterward, right? Sot was going for a little bit of a zone. Either way, you need to commit layers. You have the Fear No Evil. Again, good team fight ultimates for the Titans. But trying to just burn down the FG while the Kings are present isn't going to work out really well. Sending a Trebuchet down left where you already have a minion advantage and it's going to be able to get some pressure onto a Phoenix, all of a sudden that Fire Giant fight starts to open up a lot better for you if you're the Titans. Not just do you have the team fights, but you're going to have map pressure going your way as well. The downside is, and this is where my biggest question mark is going to sit until we get to see something spectacular happen with it, what's this Nuwa going to provide? Are we going to get a great Nuwa set of plays where it's the stun, the damage, the burst that we can expect? Or is Ting's just going to end up dying really quickly at the beginning of the fight and not really providing too much? That is like the biggest, I think, linchpin here for the Kings because I don't know what to expect out of it.
Well, Titans might just be waiting for SOT to get his beads back up. Still almost 90 seconds until he has that safety net to himself. Everybody else and every other relic is up and available for this fight. So that's the only one that the Titans kind of have to worry about a little bit here. The Kings, though, will be the aggressive ones, pushing up towards this Tier 2 tower on the right side. They've got a minion wave. They're not going to stick around for this one. They're just going to allow the Titans to clear out this wave.
Yeah, I actually like this more from the Titans. Like, I don't think the Kings are necessarily doing anything wrong in this position. In fact, maybe they actually end up buying the Titans a little bit more time. This might be the opening you need for an FG. Variety having to back just to deal with the wave on left, and now everybody's falling back. You're in a 3v5, maybe a 4v5. Start the FG.
Genetics is here. The wall is down, and so is Tusky. Aurora's HP is being shredded. He goes for the ult, but doesn't find anybody there. Instead of Captain Twig to try and deal the last bit. Will it be? No. Big Man Ting's ult. Not quite enough damage to stop that one out. Variety cancels the back, and the FG has been reset.
2 for 2 in terms of ults that are going to be changing. You don't have Tusky, you don't have Ting, so some burst damage and a lot of stuns taken away, but the FG never got leashed.
Fire Giant is going to go down. The Camelot Kings have grabbed it, but will Variety make it out is the question. His HP is falling low, stunned it, taken down. Paul finds the first kill of the team fight, but the rest of the Kings are already gone. They've sacrificed Variety to make sure they can get that objective.
If I'm the Titans here, and this chase doesn't go the way you want it to, if you aren't able to follow them, I think you ignore the Kings for a moment, and either you rush down towards left and try to help that Trebuchet, or you continue a full onslaught in mid. You also have the Oni Fury to maybe try and toss things up if you don't feel too confident. Actually, you know what? I saw how fast that Trebuchet died in front of an Artemis before. I don't want to push with it anymore. Get the jungle, clear what you can, and then fall back. I think you're in a man, not a good spot, J-Mac, I'm going to be honest. It's 26 minutes. The other team has 4 members with Fire Giant. It's not comfortable, but you've got 4 towers that are still up. You technically have a gold lead, although it's not really a whole ton. I think that you can breathe a little easy if you're the Titans. Just not as easy as I think you would like if you had the FG and were maybe pushing down the other team's Titan.
Genetics picking up what I was finally waiting to come out in this game here, especially with how long these fights are drawing out, especially once we start getting to these Phoenixes. Emperor's Armor, an item that's kind of been amongst the rumblings. A few players have picked up, a couple of teams have seen some value. Me personally, I feel with how impactful these Phoenix defenses are, how important these towers and sieges are, it feels like this item should be on just about every single team.
Honestly, it just comes down to what are your expectations? Where are you trying to fight? And I think that this is like the scream of Genetics saying, look, man, I don't care if we fight. We're coming under the tower no matter what. And so being able to get aggressive, you slow it down so you're going to take less damage, or whoever happens to be taking it's going to be taking less damage. It's got good health on it, good prots on it as well. And so realistically, it's good for while you're waiting under your siege, where the Kings have been stuck under their Phoenixes a few times so far this game. But it should make this Fire Giant, and should is the really key word, a lot easier for them to push down and get those towers.
Roar blinks into the backline, doesn't find anybody with the ult. He'll find 2 with the knockup though, and the Pyromancer. It's weird that the Pyromancer, of all things, the one that's so hotly contested right now between these teams. In the backline goes Layers, finds 3 with the Fear No Evil. He gets the ult out of Big Man Ting, so will crash right back down. But it's a triple freeze inside the Sanctified Field. Variety goes in, but he can't do much. Roar will fall down to Netroid, but Variety will trade out his life. It's SOT, and Captain Twig ripping through as much as he can, but he cannot shred enough HP fast enough. He'll go down to Captain Twig, but it's a 2-for-2 trade.
And now the bounce back. I mean, Cyclone's been still in this, and he's still hitting crits.
but it'll be a quick bounce away now. The Tartarus Titans losing a lot of HP on their primary carry. SOT does get away from the slow. Big Man Tings doesn't find the stun, but neither does SOT.
Man, either of those connect, and you're talking explosive kill potential that's suddenly there. Honestly, still think there's a lot. I think 2 Hunters versus the 3 on the side of the Kings. You got to be a lot more careful with it. There's going to be Tusky, though.
Oh, Tusky's ripping. So are the Crimson Solar. Cyclone spins. He takes down Netroid, and Genetics will go down right after it. Cyclone spin to pick up the kill. And 4 players who had that Fire Giant buff has now dwindled to just Big Man Tings.
And it's going to be gone in 40 seconds. Either way, you've got a lot of time. I mean, dual lane gone for 40. Admittedly, you will have to deal with Twig and Variety here in just a few seconds, so maybe not as much push potential as you would like if you're the Titans. But a huge set of kills, and honestly, it's scary. I think showcases what SOT can do in terms of setup potential, and that damage from Cyclone Spin. Might not be the highest 25K going to SOT, absolutely insane, but the 10K from Cyclone has been effective 10K. And so we'll have to see. I think just the continuation of where these Hunters go and how they're going to continue to perform. Right now, the answer is good. They're good. Same thing can be said. Netroid, granted, doesn't look as good at the end of the day just because of the death, but realistically did do so much in the blink of an eye. We'll have Tusky back relatively soon. Has the beads. Notably, does not have the Aegis or any other sort of safety protection that you would expect on an Artemis. So this is one that I gotta see some good utility out of that second relic, because so far I haven't seen too much in terms of what it can provide. But a good blink, Tusky, then the follow-up damage you have can be nuts. Can be.
Definitely can. No, I'm not going to disagree with you there.
In theory, if you were writing a thesis statement about would Blink Artemis Tusky actually work out well, yes. In practicality,
maybe. We'll find out. Question. That's where you have to actually do the experimentation. So you've got your hypothesis. Now you actually need to do the experiment. That way you can then give
Someone get this man a lab coat!
Somebody get Netroid that lab coat. Somebody get these teams over towards the Fire Giant. It is respawning now as it crashes back down to the battleground. 4K gold doesn't really matter in the grand scope of things. We've seen how these team fights can go either way with just one team fight ultimate. Layers, I have to highlight the like 2 Fear No Evils that we've actually seen from him have been solid. They've been fighting 3-4 people every single time that he's gone in.
I'm sorry, I'm fighting a nihilistic thought. You said, yeah, the 4K doesn't really matter in the grand scope of things. I'm like, you get a big enough scope, nothing matters. Either way, Fire Giants respond. I'll get myself back on track. I'm sorry.
No,
Either
good.
way, it's going to be an interesting fight. We mentioned the Emperor's Armor. That, I thought, was going to be a lot more big of a play during the FG itself. And honestly, in the jungle, you're looking at just 300 health, just 60 prots. It's not really giving you this crazy turnaround that it would otherwise. If you go back and you lose this FG, it's going to be helpful on defense. You get the FG, it's going to be great on offense. But while you're standing here waiting for a Fire Giant fight, it's just 2 numbers that you're going to be getting. Everybody else is getting huge power spikes. You got all the rings finished here for Paul. You've got all of the items, specifically the Heartseeker now finished for SOT. You've already had that crit, but a lot more power coming down from Cyclone Spin. Same thing can be said for Netroid. The Rada Tahuti finished for Tings. A lot of these late game 6 items, we're going to absolutely slaughter a squishy items that have been picked up. And it's just the question of how well can you live. Variety picks up a Spectral Armor, so theoretically will live under the eyes of the Titans a little bit longer than what we've seen so far. But other than that, it does feel like this is going to be positioning based. Kings were able to control a lot last time, but there's a really good punch back from the Titans, and a lot of it comes in the form of layers.
SOT spamming out some abilities. Layers using the Fear No Evil. Goes back in against Captain Twig. But Twig has Destruction just in case. BMT, is it enough damage? Yes, it is! Layers goes down in the initial 1v1 to the kill out of the mid laner.
And that, I mean, that's just unfortunate. It's the ult, it's the relics, it's the death for Layers, and now you're fighting an inevitable 4v5. Still a lot of good potential. Still got Sanctified Fields, which can turn anything around alongside just what we saw Cyclone and SOT do in terms of damage. So I don't think this is a runaway for the Kings, but it is a very distinct advantage. They could start pulling the FG, force the Titans to respond.
You see the Camelot Kings pull the enhanced Fire Giant. Netroid and Tings there. Aurora and Genetics squaring off, but Aurora's losing this match because there's another Hunter there. Netroid will shred through the health bar of Aurora. And another member of the Titans down.
Yeah.
The
All right.
Camelot Kings carry very low.
So now, you just give up the FG, maybe. No, never mind. Not even worth the try. Yeah, you back away. I think at this point, you know, I honestly maybe rotate over towards left, not necessarily for the Fury, but probably to try and grab some of these offerings, get a Trebuchet to help counter the push that is inevitable at this point, right? The Kings, they have the Fire Giant, they've got an Emperor's Armor, they should be getting towers. And you want to be able to stall that as best you can, whether that's stripping away your own jungle, getting some of that farm online, specifically for, well, Aurora's dead, so it's not going to help him out too much, but ideally getting him to the point where he can stack up some of those last couple of items, get more prots online, be a more prevalent frontliner. But realistically, just give yourself some sort of fighting chance in the grand scheme. Tier 2s, Enhanced Fire Giant, you're probably not going to fight over them. I think they have the potential to. I mean, the ults that the Titans have, you can step up to it. The minute that they step in, if the Kings decide to just take the tower, you probably need to fall back. I think that it's a little too risky to try and hug this late into the game with the itemization and the Fire Giant all in their favor. And so I think that this is a good point for the Kings to at least get to the Phoenix line and get some really much needed at this point gold lead for some team to actually have something that feels substantial.
We do see it as the Kings who secure that next Trebuchet, and now we see that Emperor's Armor in effect. Those new Clay Soldiers will tank up the tower and allow the Kings to strip away one final tower, as only now the Tier 2 and mid still stands for the Titans to defend against, but it doesn't seem that they want to defend against Tier 2s. They want to hold out against these Phoenixes. The Kings are pushing up. They've got their jungler now, Captain Twig, making his way for a full 5v5 on this left side.
Yeah, this is where things get maybe the most difficult. Who starts the fight if you're the Kings? And that's where I'm left kind of standing. I mean, the biggest initiator usually would be Ymir. Either gets a sick wall, maybe he gets a good freeze, but if they're not going to leave their Phoenix line, then that means Genetics has to go a little bit deeper. And, you know, admittedly should be able to withstand a few shots from the Phoenix, but it's not going to be very easy for them overall.
Variety uses his engage on the mid lane. Aurora picks up Genetics, tries to lock him under the tower, but the beads will get the Ymir out. Sanctified Field will be immune out by Captain Twig. A little bit more damage is necessary. Destruction comes out just in time to save Captain Twig's life. But now all the Kings are on the run. The Tartarus Titans have pushed them off of the Phoenix, and instead are pushing up for the chase.
Teams specifically, incredibly low. They're going to lock him down.
Evil by Layers is massive. That droid goes down. Big man Tings goes down. It's a double kill for Layers, and maybe even give him a triple if he can find that damage against Twig. He will not. And the wall from Genetics will hold off the Titans. The Titans defend their Phoenix, and they find two.
And again, weird balancing equation. You've got a numbers advantage. If Cyclone can stop this back just in time, Variety and Genetics didn't go back, so now you can either split up or chase them down. Who cares about the wall? You've got a lot of free time over here to work with. You can clear up these waves, start pushing forward. There's a Primal Fury if you want to go for that route. Only a minute left on the Fire Giant for the 3 that still have it. So a lot of ample opportunities up for the Titans, and all they need is a good kill to maybe seal the deal.
Twig doesn't have ult, but not enough damage out of Layers and Sot to take him down. Instead, they'll focus their sights on the Trebuchet. They'll burn that one away. And now regroup as Variety didn't get a chance to go back to base. The Fear No Evil gets the beads, but a wall for Genetics. Maybe enough to slow everything down. Layers get some good damage, but a better freeze out of Genetics will delay the Titans. And now, it's the Titans in the driver's seat. They're the ones pushing up on a Phoenix of their own, but this wall from Genetics is really doing numbers to slow them down, but it's not going to be enough. The Titans grab the right side Phoenix.
Honestly, it keeps them in an interesting spot. Look where Twig is. Look at Variety, who just teleported in. They're going to continue going for this fight.
Aurora very low. That ult not enough. Captain Twig and Variety have rejoined. They've recouped, but Aurora can find his way to bounce himself back out. Can Captain Twig cut off the path? He needs one stun, one hit on anybody, but Paul is going to slow everything down. The beads are not enough out of Captain Twig. Aurora finally goes out, but Captain Twig, he will not. Layers finds the turnaround, but trades his life.
And now the chase is on. I mean, if you're the Kings, you need a little bit more, but the tower's still there. On the right-hand side, you don't have the chase, you don't have the potential. So you're going to have to let that one go down. You lose the first Phoenix of the game, Fire Minions on right. So that gives something that Tings is going to have to do. And you've got a little while before this FG ends up coming back. Just a few seconds at this point. But that should be a great advantage. I mean, Aurora's down for 30, 45 here for Layers. So theoretically, in just a little bit, this is going to be an advantage for the Kings to leverage, whether it's in the jungle or on the map. Well, that one's going to be determined right here.
Cyclone has to use beads to
Way too
get
early.
away.
Yeah.
But he will get away, and that's the most important thing for the carry right now on the Titans, is to stay alive. But the Fire Giant is respawning in just a couple of seconds, and the Camelot Kings have already set up the aggressive position around it.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you just got one of the safety relics from the Hunter as well. I mean, it should be, could be, and I'm going to say will be a free FG for you. I mean, something, again, might be able to step up, but is it worthwhile? I don't know if that's going to be something they want to get aggressive on. If they can force a fight, force someone on the Kings to step too far forward, that's a different story.
Dot needs one hit right here to take it. He does not find the steal, but can they find the fight after? No axe toss for the moment, and it'll just be a little bit shy. SOT cannot steal that one away, and another enhanced Fire Giant goes to the Kings, this time around all 5 members.
Everyone's got it. Everyone's full health. Everyone's got their ults back. It's just a difference of some of these relics, beads that are burned right now on the Kings, some that are coming back off cooldown, which is maybe going to help them even more, specifically for variety there, the teleport that's going to be available. And you've got a pretty large window to work with, not for Layers and Paul, but for Cyclone's been 100 seconds left before those beads come off cooldown. And it's just going to be, I mean, at this point, it feels like a game of inches, right? Where are you going to be able to find that little bit of extra pressure? Are they going to find a great ambush? No. Okay, there's a good ward from Variety. And so do you follow up with these fire minions? Do you try to find a little bit more? And I think the Titans have to say no. Good defense, we've already seen it. They've got great team fight. And the Kings, it goes back to that initiation conversation I was having earlier, which is normally it's a great freeze or a great wall from a Ymir. Maybe you can rely on Captain Twig to jump in and start things off with a kill. And otherwise, you're relying on Variety, who very notably has been shredded every time that ult has been used aggressively. And so that one's going to be the big question mark. When it does come down to chasing these Phoenixes and getting under those birds, who's going to be the one that commits? Because it's probably going to be your life unless it's a mistake from the Titans.
Variety went into the backline, and Variety is melting. Sanctified Field and Fear No Evil will hold him and Genetics in place, but Captain Twig tries to find something in the backline. Nobody is down just yet, and Captain Twig finds a path out. Not enough for BMT, so Netroid will have to finish the job and take down the support.
Layers barely lives through that one to the point where he was almost grayscale, but does live. Sucks to lose Aurora. He's your main tank. He's the guy who's going to be able to step forward and really peel for you, and that's going to end up hurting your team pretty heftily over here. You need to get the reset here if you're SOT, but you still have a lot of damage. Stepping under the Phoenix isn't going to be easy for the Kings.
Well, the Phoenix is already down at half HP, just a couple of auto attacks from the carry on the Camelot Kings. No ultimates, aside from Cyclones, up to try and defend against this one. I'm not sure they have enough to do so. The wall will block off a few shots. The Kings will take away the right Phoenix. And just as theirs comes back up, now the Kings can regroup and fall back.
Honestly, the pace setting that Genetics has been able to accomplish with the wall, whether it's denying autos coming from the Titans to his team or from the Titans to objectives, either way, he's slowed down so much of what could have been stronger plays from the Titans. Even, you know, the last Phoenix where he defended it, it just made it so that there was a few more seconds, and that let the team regroup, reset, and come back in and get some kills. I think that these walls have been just devastating overall for the Titans, having to deal with them, having it block their damage, and I expect that to come into play here. What we just saw on the right side, Phoenix was blocking away the autos, find where Cyclone's standing, make sure he can't hit anybody, and let Netroid get the kills.
He rips through Captain Twig very low. Variety finds 3 with the stun. But Captain Twig finds 1. Layers turns around for another, but so does Cyclone Spin. He'll take down the enemy Hunter. And now it's the Camelot Kings on the run. Genetics shredded away. And with what little health he has left, will bide his time against the 2 Hunters of the Titans and will go down.
And now that, I mean, what, Chase is on? There's only 2 people left to deal with. You've got some fire minions you've got to worry about, but you've got a minute to work with here if you are the Titans. You surge forward. You take this fight. I mean, you've got nothing to worry about realistically from Twig. If he jumps forward, if he steps up to you, he's going to die almost instantly. Same thing for Tings, although Tings has both relics. So the burst potential is there, the damage is there, but with the time window that you have, this should be game for the Titans.
Should be. Will they finish that full push? It's 20 seconds until Variety is back up. Left side Phoenix goes down. BMT, no ult for a few more seconds. The Titans hesitating to fully commit as SOT gets stunned and eats a good bit of damage. The Titans push it in the throne room. BMT goes up with the ult and will find a good bit of damage out of Fear No Evil. We'll try and put some away, but Captain Twig is already gone. The Tartarus Titan should be able to close this one out unless BMT can find a miracle defense. That's 2 down. But with the minions through, Cyclone
Oh my
in,
God!
and by Variety, it's going to be a defense. The Druid holds on with the rest of the Camelot Kings, and now it's their turn to push up.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and reverse all of it. You got a minute if you're the Kings, and you've got fire minions helping you out this time around. And just Paul, look, Paul with beads, Paul with Aegis, Paul with Sanctified Fields, but he's against 4, and they're going to be pouring into the room here in just a few seconds. This one, you want to talk about miracle plays. This is what is going to be necessary from Paul if they want to stay alive in this one. And I'm going to be honest, J-Mac, I don't see it happening, but you never know.
Paul's got to do it all here. Only 1 Phoenix left, and I don't think the Kings care about that one. Variety wraps around the backline, slows down Paul. Sanctified Field very early in the fight, and now he has nothing to defend and no HP left to himself. The Camelot Kings, Netroid, Captain Twig, and Variety hold out against the defense on their own Titan, and they turn this one around. 45 minutes
That's
in, the Kings
wild.
finally close out game 1.
That's wild, dude. Look, I don't know. I thought for sure that was over about
should
30
have been.
seconds before it was. And that just goes to show, look, if you're looking at those numbers from the 9.5 patch and you're wondering, what does this mean? The Titan getting a little extra health there, that Titan's dead on 9-4, and it's a Titan's win. Granted, probably also about 20 minutes shorter, right? So realistically, things go by quicker. But that little bit of extra HP gives it just enough tankiness, plus just great plays from Tings where I least expected it. The new Wah all of a sudden stepping up. I think it was a really, really good showing there for the Kings. And being able to turn it around, like at the cusp of death, that's impressive.
What a great turnaround by the Camelot Kings. They'll move on to the upper side of the bracket, and we'll throw it over to the desk to break down that game.
And I think tennis is maybe the biggest comparison we can draw here. It was so back and forth between these two teams. It was Kings with the advantage, Titans with the advantage, Kings with the advantage. Constantly looking back and forth between these two teams to see who had the upper hand. But in a stunning, I believe it was a 4-man defense there from BMT. Kings finally able to slice out the rest of that point.
Yeah, I really think it did come down to that ease of play we were discussing on the initial desk, where the Tartarus Titans, sure, were able to make it to that late game phase from an even fight, but how often were your triple hunter, essentially 2 physical, 1 magical composition, quite able to find all the same targets? Individually, if any one member of those 3 survived, that created a situation where the Titans could look towards objectives. If they're trading out 2 of their hunters, you still have Olarun. If you're trading a hunter and Olarun, you still have 1 more. But in these late game team fights, when it really just comes down to who's landing their abilities more consistently on higher priority targets, the Camelot Kings had a much easier time. It was at all times Captain Twig getting involved. It was at all times. Well, Netroid in particular, I think, really does deserve some credit. These Artemis plays were just phenomenal in their own right. This guy felt untouchable in the back line. Genetics creating separation in these team fights. I mean, there was 3 back-to-back Phoenix Sieges where I'm just sitting with Ro and we're both sitting there like, huh, that's a good wall. Nobody can defend this Phoenix because there's a wall there now. And Genetics creates those opportunities for his team. Layers always working his way in at times, but was largely mitigated by Captain Twig, who was able to use Destruction and immune out all of the kill potential of some of these Fear No Evils. Just really like what we saw from the Camelot Kings, and it's something that we had hypothesized about this team. When games go late, when it's these clinchers of sets, the Camelot Kings have got clutch in spades.
And, you know, we got to talk about BMT here on the new 41,000 damage on the board. And
Yeah,
so
take off
often,
20 because the ultimates.
Well, okay, but that's what I want to highlight, though, Mifflin. Like, the amount of times, like, someone, I think specifically there was a play around the Fire Giant about 30 minutes in. Twig and Layers get into an altercation. Twig falls like to half HP, Layers also just below half. And while Twig is able to just walk away, Layers has no Aegis up. So he just gets absolutely demolished by BMT. And the Kings, I think, use that new Wah ultimate perfectly.
Yeah, I was surprised that the Titans did not like to go towards Shell or something along those lines to just mitigate some of the effectiveness of the new ultimate. Because it felt like new ultimate was either taking lives or was taking Aegises. I think 1 Shell would have likely had gone a long way for the Tartarus Titans, but the Camelot Kings did not have to contend with that. 41,000 damage from Big Man Tings. 27,000. Oh, 47, excuse me. I'm used to the little cross, and it's not there.
No, sorry, I was saying 47,000 damage for Sot.
Oh, for Sod, yeah. Yeah, Sot has a phenomenal performance as well. Netroid deserves some credit. Cyclone Spin similarly has a great performance on the other side for the Tartarus Titans, but it's the Camelot Kings who dominate. And I think it is just that team fight phase, man. I mean, if the first 20 minutes of the game are going to have 2 total kills, you got to talk about the team fight. And this time, it's the Camelot Kings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is something that we were talking about, behind the scenes as well. Just the complete lack of kills in that first 20-25 minutes, basically up until that first Fire Giant. But Mifflin, the Camelot Kings will be moving on now to our first best of 3 coming up after this game, up against the Leviathans. And now we saw the Leviathans playing a much faster pace of game earlier on against the Warriors. So we'll have to see if they're able to close this next set out, the 2 games that they need to win, as quickly as they were against the Warriors.
Yeah, I think best of 3s are really going to get a good show of how 9-5 is played at the absolute highest level of play that SMITE has to offer. I think the Leviathans and the Kings are going to be very interesting to see. Would some of these games probably go a little bit shorter? Sure. I mean, Blitzkrieg is certainly a great stratagem and it has worked in the past, but these are 2 teams that have historically decided to take these games a little bit longer. So I'm expecting this set to be a lot of mind games, decided very often in the P's and B's, decided very often at that 25 to 30 minute mark.
Well, ladies and gents, Camelot Kings win this one, but we'll have to see as they clash against the Leviathans coming up next.